Salve omnes and welcome to this week's video tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at Caput 14, chapter 14. And you can see our topic is I stem nouns of the third declension, ablatives of means and accompaniment and manner. In general, this is not a difficult concept despite the unfamiliarity perhaps of this grammatical terminology. You should be comfortable by now with the fact that Latin is an inflected language and it's all about the endings in terms of being able to identify the meaning of words and syntax, grammar, and translation. So this topic's no different, except we're focusing on third declension adjectives that have an I stem. Once again, because we do not do a lot of writing in Latin or spelling, this is simply a matter of recognizing that there are some third declension adjectives that have exceptions in their most common declension endings. In particular, as we'll see, the third declension genitive plural, which adds an I before the characteristic um ending. So big picture, once again, we must master these declension endings. In this case, third declension blank ema, ace ibus is ibus. You'll see that there's sometimes an I inserted before or instead of some of these endings, but again, these are frequent in number. As far as the ablative, as your book points out, the ablative is obviously one of the cases, and it often functions adverbially in terms of how or why someone or something is being done. The most common translation of ablative is with or from. And so to keep that in mind, if we can just remember with and from, we're going to be very successful with this grammar concept. And again, this is all pointed out in your book. You can see some of the translations here. With a pencil for stilo, because that's second declension, ablative singular. Here we have by money, because it ends in a, which is first declension, ablative singular. Here we have with my own eyes, which is second declension, ablative plural, namely is. So again, if you look here, second declension, ablative plural, is. There's the pecuniae, which we just mentioned a moment ago. And then by his own labors, this is going to be laboribus is third declension, ablative plural. There's our ibus, but sua, suus is a first or second declension, so we have suis laboribus. So, but you can see once again, by or with is the most common translation. Even the so-called ablatives of accompaniment and manner, or answering the question how, you can see with friends, with speed, with courage, with them is our basic prepositional phrase that we'll need to pay attention to. So big picture, this is not a difficult chapter. So let's focus on vocabulary and further mastery of declension endings. And if we do that, we will be successful here and going forward. So as always, please read through this chapter carefully on your own. And please do the self-tutorial exercises at the back of the book, which also have the answers before you tackle the sententia antiquae, because doing those easier exercises, which tend to be repetitive, will help you. Don't forget there is a companion website if you want to practice hearing how these words are pronounced, although I don't think pronunciation in Latin is that difficult. But we will be using these new vocabulary words in our readings and exercises for today. So make sure you familiarize yourself with those before you tackle the sententia antiquae or the classical sayings or ancient sentences. All right, let's begin. Deus aques Maria in principio appellevat. So here we have from the book of Genesis, from the Vulgate, translated by Jerome in the 5th century into Latin. What do we have here? And God called the waters the sea in the beginning. Once again, you can change the word order stylistically. I tend to keep my translation somewhat literal so you can follow the grammar. Et means end. Deus is God, so we capitalize it. Here, called, so this is past tense, isti, imos, istis, eron, so we need to be able to recognize this is perfect. And then waters is first declension accusative plural, but then Maria is what he calls it, which is the sea, the word for sea. And then in principio means in the beginning, because second declension ablative singular is o. And so here's another function or usage of ablative, often expressing some kind of prepositional phrase, in this case, in the beginning. So we put it all together and we write in the beginning, God called, I type here, the waters, the sea. All right, so in the beginning, in principio. Let's see, did I put an N there? I don't think I did, so let me change that there. And in the beginning, I know it's common in education, going back to elementary school. I remember my teachers saying, don't begin a sentence with end. That's just not true, although when you're first learning end, for whatever reason, people tend to overuse it, so they start every sentence with end, and that is just stylistically not very interesting, and then it also has later issues with using this as a conjunction. But there are many great writers who begin a sentence with end. And in the beginning, God called the waters the sea. And in the beginning, in principio, God called, the pelevat, the waters, there's our direct object, and then the sea. Duo terra ipse hominis et animalia olim creavit, from Lucretius, who was a materialist in an ancient, not a modern sense. The earth itself created men and animals once. So we're going to start with this. This is how you say once upon a time in Latin, olim. So once, oops. Let's see, oops, going back here. Once the earth itself created, so we got to be able to recognize this as past tense. Again, if we don't know that, we'll have to use Whitaker's words to, but here we have isti, imos, istis, erunt. And then here's our direct objects. Homines is third declension accusative plural, ending in es. But then animals is a neuter noun, also in the plural. That's why it ends in the letter A. So if you look at second declension neuter plural, the accusative direct object is the letter A. Once again, if we're not sure about that, we'll have to use a dictionary, or in this case, Whitaker's words, and take our time. But if I type in animalia, you'll see it's a neuter noun, so N means neuter. And then you can see, depending on the context, you have to decide if it's nominative, vocative, or accusative. In our context, it's the direct object, so it is accusative plural. We put all that information together, and we're led to this ending, which matches the original. And then it's just a question of knowing the vocabulary, which is indicated, I believe. Yep. And so once again, these exercises presuppose that you have gone through the chapter, studied the vocabulary, done the self-tutorial exercises before you get to this part of the chapter. All right, let's put it all together. So once, olim, the earth itself, and this is what we mean by ancient materialism. It was a kind of naturalism, so it had nothing to do with buying consumable objects, but rather that things did not have any gods or goddesses behind their creation, but rather simply naturalistic reasons for the way things are. So once the earth itself, so olim terra ipsa, created men and animals. If you want to say human beings, that's fine too. So created human beings and animals. All right, so fairly straightforward, but this chapter really allows you opportunity to more fully master these noun declension endings. Tres panservat ovis et magistros fortunatos ovium, from Virgil. Pan, as you can see, is the god of pastures and shepherds in classical mythology. Servat means, in this case, to keep or protect. Once again, I encourage you to take the time, as with anything that you want to do well, and look these words up. So servat can mean watch over, protect, store, keep, guard, preserve, save. Many of these will work. Choose the one that you think fits the context the best. So in this case, I'm going to say Pan protects. Pan protects the sheep and fortunate masters of the sheep. So let me write that down here. So Pan protects the sheep and fortunate masters of the sheep. Let's go back to the Latin. Pan protects the sheep. Why? Because third declension accusative plural is es. So oves. That's our direct object. And the fortunate masters, if you want to say fortunate owners, that does work, but I would keep it more literal. And fortunate masters, that is second declension accusative plural. Latin likes to put the adjective after the noun, so fortunatos magistros. But then here's one of our I stem nouns of the sheep. So notice we're putting an I before the um, because this is an I stem noun, hence the topic in this chapter. And so it's just one of those things you have to learn, but you can see here there is a letter I before the because that is a genitive plural, and it means of the sheep. So we put it all together. I think we're in good shape here. All right, so again, these are fairly straightforward once you take your time and work through them. Let's see, Horace, great writer, 65 BC to 8 AD. Let's see, parva formica onra magne ore trahit. So a small ant, so this is remember if it's italics, that's the translation. These are words in English that come from it. A small ant drags heavy loads with its teeth. So let me write that out there. A small ant drags heavy loads with its teeth. So nice. How true is that? Pretty strong. So a small ant. So that's fairly straightforward. Looking up the words. And then trahit is present tense. Traho, trahre, traxi, tractum. It's where we get the word tractor. I think we've had this before. And then here, we need to be able to recognize this is a neuter noun. You may have to look that up, but this is accusative plural, second declension ending in A. And so German also has neuter nouns, as does other languages. English doesn't, because English doesn't have cases. But here, heavy loads, and then here is our ablative of means. Actually, in this case, what did I say? Teeth. I should say with its mouth. So let me change that. With its mouth, because teeth would be dentes. So with its mouth, that is third declension ablative singular. So that is the ablative of means, which is another topic in the chapter. How does the ant carry large loads? Orre, so Latin just uses one word, with its mouth. You could say with the mouth too, if you prefer, but that's one of the challenges in Latin, is adding the prepositions and the articles that are often not necessary or needed in Latin. All right, so that one also is fairly straightforward. Oh, here's a nice one by Terence, who was a comedian. I grabbed the wolf by the ears, which you can see is a proverb meaning to grab the tiger by the tail. So I grab tenia, like tentacles on an octopus. The wolf, there's second declension accusative singular, um. That's our direct object. And then we have the ablative auribus, because ears is third declension in Latin. And again, once again, if we don't know that, we have to look up the words. And you can see the number 3 tells us it's third declension. And then it's going to be ablative of manner. How do I grab the wolf by the ears? So that's what manner means. How do you do something? So we put it all together. I grab the wolf by the ears. I grab the wolf by the ears. So this one also is fairly straightforward, and as I mentioned, this gives you a great opportunity to master the declensions, which I believe is the key for being a student of Latin. All right, moving on to number 6, Ille magnum turbam clientium se cum habet. Also by Horace. Here we have patrons and clients as the context. That was an important part of ancient Roman society, if not economic life as well. Ille means he, so you may still be at this stage where you need to work your way through the vocabulary, and if you do, you might have something like this. He, large, crowd, clients with him, has, but then we want to put it in more standard intelligible English. He has a large crowd of clients with him. Now, crowd could also be number. Normally it means crowd. So if we look up this, it could be crowd or multitude. Maybe multitude might, we don't know the context of this, whether Horace means it's good that he has so many dependents or not, but maybe multitude certainly would be one option. So he has a multitude of, well, then in case large multitude, though, that would be almost redundant. So I'm going to say a large crowd of clients with him. He has a large crowd of clients with him. Let me make a couple additional points about this Latin. Is client also is a neuter, or excuse me, an I stem word. So we put the I because it's of clients. Normally we just have in third declension genitive. We put an I there because that's the rule in terms of spelling it. And so he has a large crowd of clients with him. Secum means with him. So magnum turbam are both the accusative direct object in the first declension. So magnum turbam, that tells us this is the direct object because they're in the accusative case. So we put all together, and there's our translation. Moving on here. Hunc nemo vi neque pecuniae superare potuit. So what do we have here is potuit means was able. This is one where you're probably, because it's somewhat irregular in one sense, you're probably going to have to look this up to make sure you get the right tense. So this is perfect active indicative third person singular, because pot est would be present tense. So we got to make sure we get the right tense here. That's very important. So he was able. So no one was able to defeat him with power nor money. So in other words, the idea is that he was a moral person, so he could not be corrupted or bribed by money or by force. So V could mean power or force. Once again, we don't have a lot of context in this Wheelock's Latin. As I mentioned, the Wheelock's Latin is meant to elicit dialogue and intellectual conversation in the classroom, which we're not doing in this format. So you can do force, power, might, violence, strength, I think is a misreading of this. So I would probably avoid that one. But no one was able to defeat him. Superare could also mean, that's where we get the word Superman, but it could also mean overcome, conquer, survive, surpass. So maybe I'll go with either conquer or overcome. The idea is, once again, that no one was able to bribe him or corrupt him morally. So no one, nemo, was able, potuit, to conquer, superare, him, hunk, so that's our direct object, and then by money or power. So let's go back and take a look at this. So no one was able to conquer him by money or power. By money or power. Pecuniae v. Notice pecuniae is first declension ablative singular. And then your book does point out the word power or force is irregular. And so notice this really doesn't fit any of our declension endings, ending in I. And so that is irregular. It just has to be memorized because it doesn't fit into irregular declension endings. There's always exceptions. But once again, this is, if you can master this, you can read Virgil in the original. All right, moving on here to number octo. Animos eos erat ignaros artium malarum. His mind was ignorant of bad arts. So let me write this down and then I'll explain it. His mind was ignorant of bad arts. What does that even mean? Well, once again, that he dedicated his mind to good things, to virtue, to courage, to justice. So he wasn't a person, according to Sallust, who was out trying to trick people based on their ignorance and laughing all the way to the bank, but rather was focused on living a good life. So eos can mean his or her, so but it ends in us, so it tells us it's masculine, so we're going to say his. His mind. Now, animus can mean soul, but most of the time in classical Latin, I think we should think perhaps translate it as mind, because we're not in a Christian context for the Wheelock's Latin. So his mind was, so there's our third person singular imperfect, ram res rat ramus rates erant. I was, you were, he was. And then here, notice our genitives here. So here's our adjective. His mind was ignorant, and then of bad arts. So this is first declension genitive plural, and this is third declension genitive plural. So first declension genitive plural ending in arum, but then artium, which is an I stem, we put an I right there, and so there we have our double genitives. So once again, that sometimes you do have in Latin two words that are next to each other that have different declensions. That's just the way Latin is, and so that can be a little bit different than English. Obviously, it might take some time getting used to, but that's how we read and explain that one. His mind was ignorant of bad arts. Once again, I don't know if this is the best translation, but again, I want to keep it somewhat literal. Number novem, magna pars mei mortem vetebit. So this allows us to remember bo bibi bibi boo is future tense, and it means a great part of me avoids death. So a great part of me avoids death. A great part of me oops, avoids death. Now, what does that even mean? Let's think about what this means. Well, Horace seemingly believed in an afterlife, if you will. That yes, we die in this world, but perhaps we leave behind some legacy, or some part of us remains in this world, or some part of us goes on to the Elysian fields, or some kind of afterlife. Again, we don't have context to speculate on that. But nevertheless, even though our bodies die, perhaps our souls remain. And someone like Horace, who dedicated himself to the life of the soul. In fact, we still read him today. He's the one who coined Carpe Diem, seize the day. So, yes, I think in Horace's case, it's true to say a great part of him remains, or avoids death, and is still alive today. All right, moving on to number 10. Vos amici docti exemplaria Graeca semper cum cure versatate. Versates. This one's a little bit longer, so we probably got to take our time. When you look up words using Whitaker's Words or Dictionary, you probably have something like this. You, friends, learned, examples, Greek, always with care, study. So here we have second person plural. So you, my learned friends. So this one would probably have to go a little bit slower. So you, my learned friends. So that is the vos amici docti. If somebody's a doctor, it means that you're learned. You, my learned friends, and then always study. So this one, always semper study. So I'm going to write that down. Always study. But then study what? Well, here we have another neuter noun, Greek originals or Greek models. Make sure we capitalize Greek. Models, you can decide if you want whether one you use originals or models. And then with care, because cum is followed by the ablative when it's functioning as a preposition. Remember, cum can mean when it's a conjunction, but here we have an a, which is first declension ablative singular. That tells us it's being used as a preposition. So we can say, always study Greek models with care. Cum cure. All right, and I think we'll stop right here. We could do one by Cicero, but if you want to try that on your own, and let me know what you come up with, I'll be happy to give you some feedback. All right, moving on to store teeth. Actually, we're going to use this as our long reading of the day. There is another one by Cicero. If you want to try your hand on that, you can. I think for today we'll focus on Martial, because we haven't had a lot of Martial. He and Juvenal are satirists, and you can see here we've had they give you a lot of help with the vocab. And then if you go to Denmark, in the Danish National Museum in Copenhagen, which I recommend, Denmark's a great country, you can see some dentures, and also which seems right here, some dental appliances. So, caveat emptor, they say, maybe a caveat dentor, beware of the dentist. Perhaps still true today, and for reasons that hopefully you don't have experience with. All right, let's take a look at the store teeth here. This one is interesting because even though they give us a lot of vocab, the word order and the sense of it, because it's satirical humor in a foreign language in particular, sometimes is more implied than explicit. So let's go through the vocab using what they give us here, using Whitaker's Words, which of course you'll do on your own, as I did once upon a time. And you'll probably have something like this. Tias has black, white, Licania teeth. What reason is? Bought these has she those, or she there. So you can see even using Whitaker's words or doing a dictionary, this one still is going to require quite a bit of interpretation and intelligence to come up with it. So once we get the vocab, we definitely need to find the subject and the verbs because that's going to tell us who's doing what. So here they tell us Thais and Lacania are the names of women. And then they both take the same verb and object. So that's going to be helpful because then we have Thais has black teeth. Lacania has white teeth. So here we're following our adjectives. Thais has black teeth. Lacania has white teeth. So let's write that down. And we'll call this store teeth. And let's see, how are they spelled again? So Thais has black, I can type here. Thais has black teeth. Thais has black teeth. Lacania has white teeth. All right, so that is the end of the sentence. Let me just go over that one more time because this one can be tricky, but they tell us that we're using the same subject and object for both Thais and Lacania, who are female names, or what are female names. Thais has black teeth. Lacania has white teeth. Notice the adjectives are second declension accusative plural, os, and then the dentes is third declension, and so that explains our case endings. And then quae ratio literally means is that why is this the case? Literally what reason is. So you could say what is the reason would be kind of a straightforward. What is the reason? So here's another cool moment in Latin, I think, is words like reason come from Latin. So that's pretty important. Words like dentist, teeth come from Latin. So Latin is a pretty important language. What is the reason? Now this one gets a little bit tricky. Is we got to keep in mind that somebody has white teeth and somebody has black teeth. Well, use a little common sense. So literally is that she bought hers, she has hers. So what they're saying here is that the reason that Thais has black teeth is she has her original teeth. And even today, if you don't go to the dentist and get dental work, you probably have maybe not black teeth, but certainly crooked teeth. And so that's the humor here, but trying to sort out, you got to use a little bit of logic to figure out what the reference is to. So why does Lacania have white teeth? Well, she bought them. They're fake. Why does Thais have black teeth or decayed teeth? Well, she has her original teeth. So she bought hers is the way I would write this here, is that probably in English, just to make it clear, I'm going to actually put her name again. So Lacania bought hers, and then Thais has hers. So you can see it loses a little bit in translation because that's what great writers do, such as Marshall. So yeah, so she Lacania bought hers, and Thais has hers. All right, so that is a good one to end on because even though it's only 2 sentences, it's a little bit tricky. My sense is I would spend probably 15 minutes studying this because in my experience, this one is not easy. because you have to use logic and imagination in addition to the grammar in order to kind of get it. But they kind of tell us, or they don't tell us, but they give us hints over here. But using common sense in our experience, why would somebody have white teeth and somebody have black or decayed teeth? Well, Marshall tells us why. All right, so that was it for this week's lesson. Again, if you want to try your hand at the Cicero one, you can. And then always read the rest of the book, because the last part gives you some interesting aspects of the continued relevancy of Latin. Next week, we have numerals, genitive of the whole, ablative with numerals, and ablative of time. So another topic that, quite frankly, is going to allow us to focus on genitive and ablative and case endings, which is good, because once again, I believe this is the key to learning Latin. And then the chapter after that, we probably have, well, third declension adjectives, which is so really the next couple chapters are a great opportunity, as noted several times, to master the Latin noun declensions and adjective declension endings to improve your Latin.